Julianne, I wanted to ask you quite a specific question to start off with. Obviously, we want to talk to you about the Equal Pay Act. We played a clip last night, which was a backbench Erica Stanford saying this.
I want to acknowledge tonight the Minister, Magenta, who has done an exceptional job. She did an exceptional job earlier answering our questions and done a great job shepherding this bill through the House, and I commend her for that. She's been outstanding. I do want to say,
Now,
though...
I don't know what happened to that Erica Stanford. We'd like to introduce that one to Erica Stanford 2025. But can you, obviously, back in the day, you were quite a spearhead of part of what was going through. What were you involved with, and how were you involved with getting through this latest stage of the Equal Pay Act before we get to what have these guys done? What have these vandals done now?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think people had really forgotten that that was my bill, because I haven't, I was Minister for Women from 2017 to 2020, and the Greens in our confidence and supply agreement with Labor, one of the, I can't remember how many key items we had about 19 or something. One of them was closing the gender pay gap. And I had the Minister for Women role to try and address that. And we were addressing it two ways. One was, trying to ensure that public servants we were closing the public sector gender pay gap, and particularly focused on the ethnic gender pay gap in ministries. And then the other way was the pay equity. And so while National had already introduced some changes that, provided a kind of bargaining framework, we did a lot of work with Labor. It was the Minister for Workplace Relations, Ian Lees-Galloway, and I working like hand in hand, basically hand in glove. Not like how the Minister for Women now has been involved. It sounds like she wasn't really involved at all. And the Ministry for Women wasn't involved at all. So we got the Ministry for Women at the table with MB, working on this. And there was a tripartite group, Business New Zealand and the CTU, and government working together on all the details of how this framework would work. And as it happened, I was the minister and the chair during the committee stages of the 2020 bill in July 2020. So it was pretty close to Parliament rising before the election. And because that was, of course, the time of COVID, we'd had a lot less time in the House for legislation to go through because the government was dealing with COVID. So we were working to really try and make sure we could get this stuff finished before the end of the term. And so that actually, the committee stages and the third reading were under urgency at almost midnight. But that was just because the House sat so little from March 2020 to July 2020. And then in August, there was a little lockdown and the election got delayed by a month. But that was another time. I forgot that Erica and Nicola said those things. And I felt kind of chuffed when I read it in the Hansard yesterday. Oh gosh, I almost forgot this happened. Almost the day before yesterday. And so what I would say is that a lot of years of work went into developing that framework. And we fought really hard, and particularly me as the Minister for Women with the ministry, we're fighting against the forces of the status quo, because within the New Zealand political sphere and government sphere since the 1980s, there's been, a kind of neoliberal framing of problems. And sometimes I think it's been viewed as though, which is how the current government views it, the most important thing is to limit the fiscal risk of the Crown, to reduce the amount that government needs to spend. And there isn't, the other lens, what the unions are fighting for, what the Ministry for Women is fighting for, is making sure that people in historically female-dominated professions are paid properly. And that's the price. And a lot of those professions are publicly funded because they're for public good. And, either they're employed directly or they're funded. And that could be in the health sector to Fatuora, it could be our care and support workers, people working in retirement villages, people working in early childhood centers. There's no question that if we pay these professions properly, it's going to have an impact on government spending, but it's also going to have a very positive impact on society as a whole, and it's the right thing to do.
I mean, because you were the woman in the chair, you are much more in tune with it. We described this last night, so correct where we're wrong. We've been talking about the pay equity being sort of twofold. There's the getting paid the same as men when doing the same job, but there's also the idea of undervaluing these roles in society that tend to be populated more by women than men. So it's kind of twofold. And then the question goes, why do we and we used a silly example last night, but why do we undervalue a care worker more than a rugby player? It's like there's also a societal conversation to be had over that. Are us silly lemon radio clowns from Dunedin got the right end of that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I sort of didn't explain that well enough in the opening line, is like, there's something that employers can do, including government as a direct employer, in terms of just looking at HR practices and hiring and making sure that women are getting paid the same as men for the same work. But there's also work of equal value. And that's what the pay equity process was designed to do. So the Equal Pay Act, it was found when Christine Bartlett, who was a care and support worker who was earning like less than $15 an hour, took a claim, and it went all the way, I think, to the High Court, which found in her favor, under the Equal Pay Act, that her work deserved to be paid more. And she was supported by her union to take this claim, that it wasn't about her not being paid enough for that job. It was about that job not being properly remunerated because of it being highly, highly female dominated. And there's this old example or joke, and I haven't actually checked it in a while, but apparently in New Zealand back in the 70s and before, a secondary school teacher used to earn about the same as a member of parliament, a backbench member of parliament. And that was when most secondary teachers were men. And now, of course, teachers, it's almost 2/3 of secondary school teachers are female, and the vast majority of primary and early childhood teachers are female. And teachers' pay is, lagged way, way, way behind that of a member of parliament.